voice. There is not a partisan voice. So I'm very encouraged at this moment about the fact that we're going to be moving rapidly to make the financial sacrifices that are necessary. Let me say that just a week ago, a little more than that, throughout the Congress, there were all kinds of people coming to me saying, hey, you don't need all that money. We've got all kinds of other uses for it. Defense is the place we got to get money for X and Y. That did not occur on Wednesday. There's been a 180 as of this moment in the Congress, and people recognize that this is not a short-term battle that we're about, but rather a war that will go on some years to make absolutely certain that this cannot happen again on American soil.
How did last Tuesday affect missile defense funding?
Well, I think it caused many a person, thoughtful people, to want to look again. First, they realized that missile defense is a part of our need for the future. There's little doubt that there are countries and people who are willing to prepare, develop the force, and direct missiles towards our homeland. That's a challenge that involves a lot of technology and otherwise, where we've made a good deal of progress. At the same time, there's a recognition that some of those systems have worked, some have not worked. And within the whole arena that's missile defense, we'll be rethinking how we can accelerate funding of those elements that can protect our troops short term, that indeed are effective now, and at the same time prepare for an attack that may come by way of a handbag, or an attack that may come to us by way of a missile.
Next call, San Diego. Good morning.
Good morning, sir. Good morning, gentlemen.
Hello there.
I want to make this really brief. I am Navy Reserve right now. I just enlisted within a week prior to this incident. I just wanted to get a
It is our job to make sure they know what we stand for. And you're right, we have not been letting the politicians know what we wanted. We let the whole open up that you just talked about with our intelligence, and we got a little comfortable. And that is not something any of us can do again. We still need to talk to one another. We need to protect ourselves from those who might not go along with what the American way is, or those faiths that you talked about that are basically very good. All of them are a loving faith, not a hateful faith. And that we need to be one-on-one as strong as what the country can give us in a military effect.
Well, I must say the gentlelady calling makes a kind of a fundamental point. The American citizens elect us to come to this forum to hopefully reflect their view as well as their interests, to listen to the debate and make decisions that are helpful in terms of where our people come from. I've got to tell you that the citizens in my wonderful district in Southern California do write with great regularity. They use the email. There's an awful lot of communication. But it's fundamental that communication be regular and early. For as we are in Washington, we are inside the Beltway, 3,000 miles away. That's a long ways away from the real world. Just because I got elected office does not mean I've got all the answers. And there are many of my people with information about specialty areas that are extremely helpful to me. Across the nation, people need to know that their elected representatives.
That's a portion of this morning's Washington Journal. On tomorrow's program, guests include Virginia Governor Jim Gilmore, India's ambassador to the U.S., and Associated Press chief photographer Jim Mills. You can see Washington Journal every day live at 7 a.m. Eastern here on C-SPAN. And right now we're going to take you live to the White House briefing room for today's briefing with spokesman Ari Fleischer. This should get underway in just a couple of seconds.
Thank you, Ron. The president made 3 phone calls today. I want to fill you in on that. I'll give you a walkthrough on the president's schedule. He spoke with the United Nations, Kofi Annan, the Secretary General of the United Nations, Kofi Annan, this morning. The Secretary General condemned the terrorist attacks of September 11th unequivocally and expressed his condolences to the American people. The President and the Secretary General agreed that the attacks were against all freedom-loving people and that all nations should join in the fight against terrorism. The Secretary General also expressed appreciation to the President for his message of tolerance, which the President conveyed yesterday at Washington's Islamic Cultural Center. The President also spoke with President Cardoso of Brazil this morning. President Cardoso expressed his condolences and solidarity and said that this has been an attack against Western civilization, against all of humanity. The President thanked President Cardoso for his statements on behalf of the American people, and he said that we are facing a different kind of war that will require patience and cooperation. And finally, the President spoke again today with Prime Minister Chrétien of Canada. The President expressed heartfelt appreciation for Canada's solidarity with the United States and for everything that Canada has done to assist. Let me just recap the President's day and fill you in a little bit about what he's going to do this afternoon. In addition to the phone calls to world leaders, the President convened a meeting of his National Security Council to continue the planning. The President met earlier today, as you know, with a group of charitable organizations that are doing everything they can to make it easier for the American people's outpouring of generosity to be easily met. And they have set up a special website, libertyunites.org, and They've set up a special website, libertyunites.org, and the President urges all Americans who want to help to give to the charity of their choice or to log on. It will contain information where they can go to volunteer, to help, as well as to give financially if any individual Americans seek to do so. On the personnel front, the President has a meeting today with his personnel team. These are part of the regular routine meetings of the White House. The President will have another one today as he continues to focus on the personnel appointments to the government. He will have a meeting later this afternoon with his economic team to discuss other types of action that may or may not be required to help the economy. And then this evening he will meet with and have dinner with President Chirac of France. One update on schedule. General Ashcroft, Attorney General Ashcroft, will brief at 2:30. The head of FEMA will brief at 3 o'clock, and Treasury Secretary O'Neill will brief at 4 o'clock as we continue to fill the American people in on all events that are going on. I'm sorry? That will be a closed meeting. No. Let me give you an update, too, on some of the activities around the administration, and I'll be happy to take questions. Secretary Page will be holding an interactive satellite town meeting from the museum to discuss talking with children about last week's disasters, as well as parental involvement in their children's education. At the Environmental Protection Agency, Administrator Whitman announced today that results from the agency's air and drinking water monitoring near the World Trade Center and the Pentagon disaster sites indicate that vital resources are safe. The administrator also announced that EPA has been given up to $83 million from FEMA to support EPA's involvement in the cleanup activities and ongoing monitoring of environmental conditions in New York City and in the Washington, D.C. areas. At the Small Business Administration, the administrator is in New York City today to talk about SBA's plans to assist those in need through its disaster loan program. The SBA offers low-interest, long-term financial assistance to help victims with their disaster-related losses. Two more agencies, and then I'll be pleased for questions. At Treasury, the IRS has released new information to help the public use charitable organizations and announced it will speed processing of requests for tax-exempt status from the new charities formed to assist the victims of the attacks. And the IRS is also compiling a publication called Disaster Relief, Providing Assistance Through Charitable Organizations, which will explain how to make contributions through existing charitable organizations and how new organizations can apply for tax-exempt status. And finally, as you know, the Secretary of Transportation met with airline executives to discuss the safety, the security, and the stabilization of the American airline industry. And with that, I'm happy to take your questions.
On the airline industry, is the administration moving toward the $24 billion figure that the airline industry is talking about? And another point, are you confident that the current financial woes of the airline industry are wholly owing to last week's attacks? They've been having a bad year up until now. I'm just wondering if there's any concern by the administration that you may be picking up the tab for what had been a bad year up until last Tuesday.
The Secretary of Transportation, as well as senior White House officials, met with executives of the airline industry today. And this was after their meeting with the President, after the staff and the Secretary met with the President yesterday. His charge to them was to come up with the specifics of a plan to help the airlines deal with the consequences of the attack on the United States and its implications for the airlines. That was the President's charge, and the plan that Secretary Mineta alluded to earlier that he is working on and will consult with the Congress on deals with helping the airlines so they can be secure, so they can be safe, and that they can be stable in the wake of this attack.
All right, yeah, but Ari, on the two questions about the $24 billion, and also are you confident that you're not picking up the tab for the first 9 months of this year as well as what's happening?
Well, I thought I addressed that second question when I say that the President's charge was to do so in the wake of the attack. On the first question, it's premature to know what the exact dollar amount will be. Clearly, the airlines have a dollar amount in mind, and that'll be something that the government, the administration, working with the Congress, considers.
All right, on the economy.
David?
The President and Congress are now discussing, we understand, 7 or 8 different options, some of which I gather include another tax cut to stimulate the economy. And I know the President is interested in having the administration consult with Congress, and it's sort of in that phase. But where is his head at this time about what would best stimulate the economy now? He certainly knows about this. He's thought about it. He's thought about his first tax cut. So where's his head now? Capital gains? Is that a good idea?
No, the President is actually, I've heard him say these are no ordinary times. And he said this is an economy that's going to get a dose of both supply side and Keynesian economics, meaning the advantages of tax cuts that stimulate the economy. And of course, Congress just approved $40 billion in spending, and it's an immediate, which has an immediate impact as the money is spent. That's not $40 billion over a long period of time. That's $40 billion over a relatively short time, also, which is to address some of the human suffering that has taken place. So the president recognizes that this is not an era of normal economics, normal responses, and he's going to continue to be very open-minded as he works with the Congress and with Democrats and Republicans about what comes next. But it's premature to know exactly what comes next. Yesterday's meeting that the president led about the economy and the airlines was the first of many meetings he's going to hold. I just indicated there's another one this afternoon. And so this is the beginning of a process where the president is going to consider what exact actions.
But is he more than open-minded? Is he actually committed to further tax relief? Does he believe that's what the economy needs right now?
Premature. It's premature to say. He'll have another meeting this afternoon, and he'll listen to various thoughts from various advisors, but he has not come to any determinations yet.
Ari, what is first on the agenda tonight with Chirac?
I haven't seen the agenda specifically for the meeting, but I anticipate it's going to be about, obviously, the reaction to the terrorist attack on the United States, ways of cooperating to combat terrorism. I don't rule out other important bilateral issues will be discussed anytime two heads of state are together. That can happen. So that's a summary of the agenda.
Specifically, what does the president want from Chirac?
Well, again, that gets back into the same list of specificity that I'm not going to go into if you're asking in the context of the attack. But it's going to be ways to combat terrorism and ways the Western world can unite. Randy?
Britain has said that it too wants to aid its airline industry, which is suffering, and said other countries may want to help their national carriers. Is this opening the door to a lot of economically distorting government subsidies for the industry, and could it be harmful in the long run if you provide this aid?
Well, clearly, if it's harmful in the long run, the president won't opt for it. But what the president does recognize is that this attack has had consequences, not only on the lives lost, on the people missing, and on the psyche of our country, but on American commerce, on American industry, on Americans' ability to travel, in the most specific example. And he's not going to adhere to any one rigid ideology in the wake of this. He's going to explore what the government needs to do with an open mind to deal with this. These are not ordinary times. Now, having said that, he's also cognizant of the fact, and John Roberts pointed up, that there are existing economic conditions that predated this attack on the United States. And he's tasked his policymakers to consider those factors in determining what the best next step should be.
Now, following that idea of disruption of ordinary life and so forth, what does the president expect of the American public as he conducts this war against terrorism? What kind of sacrifices, efforts, work does he want non-military Americans to do?
Well, I think number one, the president is very heartened by the resolve of the American people. This patriotic rally is in the finest traditions of our nation, and it's one reason that, as the president said, anytime anybody attacks America, it's an act of self-destruction, and that's because of the strength of our people. Two, he's asked for patience. Three, he's asked the American people to go back to work. The president thinks it's very important that people resume their lives. Every time somebody shows back up at their office, every time somebody is able to enjoy entertainment once more, every time people travel, it strengthens our economy, it strengthens our country, and makes it easier for the government to do what needs to be done to fight terrorism. So that's a short list of what the president is asking for. Terry?
You mentioned the Secretary General had expressed appreciation for the President's comments yesterday at the Islamic Center. Have you been able to gauge any other impact that appearance and those words might have had across the world?
The only way to gauge it is just to hope that acts of violence don't exist. And the President continues to remind leaders of their job around this country and calling out to people and urging that no acts of violence exist.
I'm talking about internationally. Have you heard from any Arab country or Muslim country leaders?
You may want to check with State. I've got the read on the 3 calls the President made today, but I would not be surprised, but State would have a better read.
On the scope of this response to these attacks, while the immediate focus is on these perpetrators, all administration officials have said is to eliminate the scourge of terrorism around the world. There's terrorism in Ireland, Colombia, the Philippines, Russia. Is that what the administration is after?
The president has made it clear that this will be broad and this will be sweeping, and that anybody who is part of the worldwide network that exists to foster terrorism anywhere will be included in this. Make no mistake, that is the charge that the president has set.
Does he believe it's all linked to one network?
Wherever it is, that will be the actions that the president takes.
Helen. Did he ask Kofi Annan to do anything? Have you heard from the Taliban? Have you heard from Pakistan?
Well, first of all, the United Nations has already done something. The United Nations Security Council passed a resolution on September 12th condemning this. Beyond that, there's nothing to report today. If there is any additional with the United Nations, I'll keep you informed. There's nothing beyond that from today with the UN.
Pakistan and the Taliban, what do you hear?
Well, as you know, we are not indicating with specificity what actions we have asked Pakistan to take. Nevertheless, the status of our reaction to what Pakistan has done remains unchanged. In other words, the president continues to be very satisfied with the steps that Pakistan has taken to help the United States at this time.
And what do you hear from Afghanistan?
Afghanistan, at least the ruling Taliban, have been all over the lot. They've been given a series of messages to the United States government, one seemingly contradictory from the other. So the message to Afghanistan remains loud and it remains clear. Those nations that harbor terrorists will not be spared. Major?
A couple of things. Yesterday I asked if the president had specifically decided whether or not to seek UN Security Council endorsement for any military act that would fall under the umbrella of this crusade war against terrorism. Do you have an answer to that?
Well, there's no specificity yet on whether or not anything else will be asked of the United Nations. But of course, in accordance with the United Nations Charter, all nations have the right to act in self-defense. But whether or not there'll be any additional requests made to the UN, I can't give you any indication yet, Major.
Okay. Back on the airline legislation, the industry has been giving the hill for several days now a very specific list of things it would like to see done. You've now talked, and the Transportation Secretary talked about coming up with your own plan. Does that suggest that what the air industry has put before Congress does not meet with entire administration approval and you want to go in a different direction?
No, I think what it suggests is that even at this time, the administration, the Congress are going to exercise their discretion and their judgment. They will, of course, work with affected constituencies. But in all times, war and peace, constituencies come to the United States government with requests, and those requests get considered. That doesn't mean they'll get considered and every one of them approved just exactly as proposed. And that's how our government works in all times. Jacobo?
Ari, the National Airport, Reagan National Airport, is a vital transportation center. It is also the main airport of the capital of the United States. It's a symbol. The President wants the United States to get back to normality as quickly as possible. I know there are security problems and they're trying to be addressed. Does the President have any sense or any feeling that he would like Reagan National open, or is he willing to wait?
Well, that'll be a decision that's made by the appropriate security authorities and by the Department of Transportation. That's not going to be a decision made by the President. The President is, of course, aware of the inconvenience that this has caused to people in the Washington, D.C. area. He wishes there were no inconveniences to travelers or to residents anywhere in the United States. But it's a recognition of what happens when you have an airport so extraordinarily close to so many major governmental and important facilities.
All right, what's the President saying about
Excuse me, can I have a follow-up? It's not just the inconvenience to travelers. It happens to be one of the most vital industries
Sure.
of the capital and the metropolitan area of the state of Virginia.
Sure. It is, and again, that many economies, many industries have been affected by this. But as the government reacts to all of this, security will always be an important concern. And I think that people recognize that.
All right, what about the Middle East and the President's reaction to talk of a ceasefire, and will he address this, do you think, in his meeting with Chirac for the cameras?
I'm sorry. I think there's an open event with the Chirac. Is it a pool event? Pool at the top on Chirac.
He had a specific intention to address it, or, I mean, I know he'll take questions. So.
I have not seen his remarks for tonight with Chirac yet, so.
But nevertheless, his reaction, can you tell us his reaction?
Rephrase it, reaction to?
To talk of ceasefire now in the Middle East?
Oh, yes, thank you. The President welcomes the positive statements by Chairman Arafat, including a call for a complete ceasefire, for the exercise of maximum self-restraint, and for a resumption of direct contacts between the parties. The President hopes to see these steps implemented immediately on the ground. The President also welcomes the Israeli government statement that has called a halt to its offensive military operations. The President has called on all parties, and he reiterates it today, to seize this moment and do everything possible in the wake of this attack on the United States to move forward with the peace process in the Middle East. And so the President welcomes today's remarks. David, go ahead. David, go ahead, David. Well, Mr. Consalvin, when you're the press secretary, you will be able to call on anybody in any order.
He's had his hand up for 20 minutes.
As far as I can tell, everybody in this room's had their hand up since I got here. David?
Does the President have some indication now whether Israel will be a willing partner or a hindrance to this coalition that's being assembled?
Well, the President hopes that all nations around the world will help to resolve this matter. And he's going to have continued conversations with Israel and with the government of Israel. But it's also important for Israel and for the Palestinian Authority to do all they can to seize this opportunity to move forward on peace in the Middle East, which will in and of itself be a major contribution to reducing terrorism and violence around the world. Go ahead, Jay.
All right. I just want to make it clear, when you asked before about the President's statements about eradicating terrorism around the world, how, and not being specific to Osama bin Laden and his organization, how do we then work with Iran, which there's been talk of doing, in spite of the fact that they harbor terrorists and fund Hezbollah? I mean, do we make their cooperation contingent upon serving Hezbollah up to us?
Well, I think it's going to be a very complicated matter. With different states, it's going to be more complicated. And I think the basic approach that you can look at is, as I indicated yesterday, some nations are going to be able to do more. Some nations are going to be able to do an awful lot. Other nations may be only able to do a little. But if that little is constructive, that little will proceed. I think the approach of the government will involve both a carrot and a stick. And in different nations, the carrot may be bigger. In other nations, the stick may be bigger.
But isn't it likely that in order to get Iran's cooperation, we would have to essentially give them an implicit, if not explicit, promise that we're not going to go after their own operations?
Well, I think it all depends on what the definition of cooperation is by various nations around the world. And that's why I indicate it's a complicated measure. There will be different actions taken with different governments. And I'm not going to say specifically what it will be with Iran. But
Ari, I don't think it's been over 19 minutes, actually. But given the events of
very effective way to get a question to the back.
Tag team. Given the events of the last week, and given the direction that we were headed before last Tuesday, how confident is the President that we can avoid a recession?
Well, that'll be a simple matter of judging the economics as the data comes out. The second quarter, as you know, grew at a rate of 0.2%, and the third quarter's preliminary data will be released, I believe, on September 24th. So that's next week. And we'll know at that time how close to recession the country is or is not. And of course, all of that data will substantially, if not all, preceded the attack on the country. But the President understands that the fundamental underpinnings of the economy are strong, that even with the attack, the combined effect of the Federal Reserve rate cuts and the stimulative effect of the tax cut will have an impact on the economy. We'll see precisely in the wake of the attack what level of impact they will have. And the President will gauge all that as he meets with his economic team to decide whether or not anything else needs to be done.
All right.
I want to keep going to new people who haven't asked before. Go ahead.
Ari, you said that the United States has received mixed and conflicting messages from the Taliban. How are those messages being communicated? Is the Taliban communicating with this government through an intermediary?
You may want to ask the State Department for the exact ways of the conversations. I know that in Islamabad, for example, there can be contacts between our embassy and Taliban officials in Pakistan. There are also press accounts of what the Taliban are saying. So there are various ways.
Are you trying to open a channel to that government that hasn't existed before because of this crisis?
I think you may want to check with the State Department on that. This is a real legal diplomatic matter of exactly what form of communication there is with that government, and State could explain it to you better than I can. Yeah, you haven't asked yet.
Now the Indian American community, especially with turbans and bears, are under attack in this area in Virginia. And this morning the members held a press conference at the National Press Club, and they are calling on the administration of President Bush. They wrote letters, and also that he should take steps, and call on the Attorney General to take immediate steps today. And same call was from the Indian ambassador, which also he said that we are with the U.S., but at the same time our community who are citizens of this country should be protected, and any other citizens, they are the same.
Absolutely. And the head of the FBI yesterday made that message clear, and this government will not tolerate any such intolerance. And the president is committed to doing everything he can. 99.999% of the American people would never even think or do anything like this. To the degree there is a teeny minority, this government will get them. It is wrong, and the laws must be enforced, and they will be. And that's a commitment from the president at the highest level.
All right.
Hold on, keep going here. Jim?
Yeah. At the stakeout here, Mineta seemed to say that though it's premature to talk about the specific details of an airline bailout, that the airlines should be made whole from the losses they suffered while they were forced out of the skies last week. That would suggest there is a floor on what the administration is considering for the airlines.
Well, I think what he's indicating is that we have to help the airlines to become safe, secure, and stable. There's no question that when the order from the FAA went out, ordering all the airlines to put their planes down wherever was the closest location where the FAA could land them, as opposed to their destinations, that has a cost to the airlines, of course. It also was what enabled the United States to know exactly how many flights could be hijacked that were up in the air. That's how the United States was able to quickly gain information. So this is all part of what the President has tasked his advisors and the Secretary of Transportation to look at as they consider what steps to take.
Mineta indicated, though, that at a minimum, the airline should be made whole for the losses they suffered, which he described as $250 to $300 million a day for those days when they weren't allowed to fly. So it makes it sound as if there is a minimum that the administration has already agreed to, and it's just thinking about the rest of the package.
Well, I was in synagogue this morning, and so I did not participate in the meeting with the airline people. And yesterday's meeting, there was no discussion with the president about minimums. There was just a discussion of taking those steps to help the airlines to deal with the consequences of the attack.
Ari?
Les.
The AP reports that they have filed a protest to Yasser Arafat's Palestinian Authority about threats to a cameraman who filmed crowds of Palestinians celebrating the attacks on the United States, and the Palestinian Authority ordered material not to be aired, and there were threats to the lives of cameramen. And this was also protested by the Foreign Press Association in Jerusalem. And my two-part question, the first is, the President surely supports the AP and the Foreign Press Association in this protest, doesn't he, Ari?
The President always supports the right of a free press to operate around the world.
Good. Now, since it was so many thousands of Arafat's Palestinians who in Nablus, Ramallah, East Jerusalem, and Gaza publicly celebrated the mass murder of nearly 6,000 of our fellow Americans and, I understand, 60 other countries. Why? And they also carried photos of bin Laden. Why does the President want anything to do with the leader of these creatures?
When I indicated earlier, Les, that the President welcomed the steps or the announcements that were taken in the Middle East, it's because through this tragedy, the President hopes that others in the Middle East will seize an opportunity to finally get serious about the peace process and the implementation of the Mitchell talks. Anyone anywhere in the world who reacted with any level of joy to the tragedy in New York needs to be denounced. But there still is a fundamental issue in the Middle East about how to achieve peace with Israel and her neighbors, and this president will remain committed to that process.
Ari,
Let me go to the back here. We haven't had Josh.
On the airline bailout, I think $24 billion may sound like a large sum to a lot of people, and you said earlier that many industries are hurting. Is there any thought being given to helping other industries, and can you explain more about why the airline industry should be bailed out? Does the president feel it's a matter of national security to keep all the airlines that currently exist flying?
Well, number one, when I said the president is confident in the fundamentals of the economy, it's always important to keep in mind that our nation has gone through war before. And the American people, American commerce, American industry adjusts. It does figure out how to get back on its footing. And that's part of the reason our nation is so resilient and strong for more than 200 years. In the case of the airline industry, they have been particularly harmed by what has taken place in the wake of the attack up in New York. And so the president has directed his staff to take a look at any potential proposals that can come together to help the airline industry. I indicated the president's going to have other meetings today on the overall status of the economy, and to the degree that the president authorizes any actions to help the economy, it helps all those who, of course, participate in the economy. Beyond that, I have nothing else to offer on it.
Concern that one industry after another might, as this effort goes on, especially if we go to a full-scale war situation, come to the White House with the handout saying, we need some bailout for us, and the money has to come from somewhere at some point.
Well, I don't think the president looks at this as a bailout. This is a reasoned reaction to what has taken place to the airline industry in the wake of the attack. Really?
As the administration puts together all the various pieces of the economic puzzle with the data coming in next week, how much weight, how much significance, how concerned is the administration about one particular part of that picture, which would be consumer confidence, which arguably has taken a big hit from what's happened here beyond what was already, the trend that was already evident?
Well, the answer to that really is contained when I talked about before that America has gone through war before, and our people and our industries, our commerce has proven its resiliency and strength. An amazing thing is happening right now if you take a look at consumer confidence, if you take a look at people who think the country is on the right track. There has been in many circles a patriotic rally where the American people have expressed their confidence and their belief that the United States is on the right track, that the United States economy will be strong. And it's that American spirit that has always kept us free and has enabled us to deal with any adversaries that have ever crossed our paths before. So there's that spirit of the country that will get matched by the real policies of this president that will lead to the growth and to the continuation of our strength.
All right.
Yeah, Mark?
All right, can I ask about the president's view of his own role over the next few days, or however long it takes to come up with the first of likely military reaction? Is he going to be holding daily events to rally the American people and highlight various aspects of what he believes to be this sort of comprehensive war on terror that he has in mind?
You know, there's no rule. I mean, this is new for. Fortunately, this is new for all of us. I think the president will continue to speak out as he sees fit. He will continue to say and answer things as he feels is right for the country. And that's really what you've been seeing.
Can I ask, because obviously, to the extent that American people are angry and looking for action, there are sort of two graphs going. One is going down as their attention span may begin to slip. Does he feel the need to sort of keep up a certain level of concentration on this issue?
Well, I think the president, I know the president believes his first need is to put together a war plan that will work over whatever period of time it requires. That is his first priority. And he has asked the American people for patience, as you've heard him say, as Secretary Rumsfeld has said, as the Vice President has said, as that process continues. He's aware that the American people are very focused on this right now, but it doesn't matter the degree of focus. The president will do what he believes is the right action, and he will not rush it, he will not delay it. He will act, as he has said, at a time and a moment and in a way of America's choosing. And that's his first thought. Beyond that, the president does understand that he has an important role to play in speaking to the nation. The American people want to know what he is doing, what he is thinking, and why he is thinking it. So he will continue to speak out and answer those questions. Connie?
Thank you, Ari. On the international terrorism, I understand the president wants to change international tolerance for terrorism, but you listed a disparate group of terrorists from Northern Ireland, every place else. Does the president have any proof that these different terrorist groups are linked together in any way?
Well, you know, the Al-Qaeda organization is present in, as you've heard from the President, more than 60 countries, and its links are amorphous, and that's one of the ways that terrorism has so successfully operated around the world. It's hard to tell where one group begins and another group ends often. But the President is making clear that as he approaches this, he's approaching it from a very broad and total sense, because in his judgment and the judgment of the planners, that is the way to be most effective. John?
The impression that this campaign against terrorism will be against the IRA as well as all of these. I mean, is it going to be that massive? This is what you're telling us.
The President has indicated he will go after terrorism wherever terrorism threatens the United States. And
I'll yield the floor to
Ron.
Well, actually, I want to follow up on that and then ask you something else. Have you just now declared war on the IRA?
No, I've said that the links where one group begins and another group ends are often amorphous, and the President has said he will go after terrorism in a way that is the most effective.
But you're saying
we only go to war against terrorist groups that threaten the United States. Was that a distinction you intended to make?
That's correct.
Okay.
Now, let me follow up something more nebulous. Small point. But if the Bushes had a chance to make a donation to the rescue groups, any of these charities themselves,
I'll ask.
Ari,
John, you had the floor.
We carried word of an intelligence report believed to be credible that Mohammed Atta, who was taken to be the ringleader of the 19 that were involved in last Tuesday's attack, was seen meeting with the head of Iraqi intelligence in Europe earlier this year. Do you have any knowledge of that report? Do you have any knowledge of a connection to Iraq?
I'll have to take a look at that.
The other question was, the President used the word crusade last Sunday, which has caused some consternation in a lot of Muslim countries. Can you explain his usage of that word, given the connotation to Muslims?
I think what the President was saying had no intended consequences for anybody, Muslim or otherwise, other than to say that this is a broad cause that he is calling on America and the nations around the world to join. That was the purpose of what he said.
Having used that word, Ari, will he not use it again in the context of talking about this effort?
I think to the degree that that word has any connotations that would upset any of our partners or anybody else in the world, the President would regret if anything like that was conveyed. But the purpose of his conveying it is in the traditional English sense of the word. It's a broad cause.
If I could follow up, Ari, you mentioned the President's pleasure with developments in the Middle East. What role did the administration play in all of its ongoing diplomatic conversations the past week to achieve what appears to be the beginnings of a breakthrough in the Middle East on the peace question?
Well, it's been a constant process. It's something that the President spoke with Prime Minister Sharon about when they spoke on the phone earlier, and it's been something that the Secretary of State has been very involved in his conversations. And it's also based on good sense that from this there is an opportunity.
Carry on with that. It's an opportunity because it's necessary for the United States as it builds a coalition to make sure there's also progress shown in that part of the world?
Because I think it's a reminder to the parties in the Middle East that they can choose a path that leads to further violence or they can choose a path that leads to peace. And it wasn't so long ago that the two were making progress on the path that led to peace. And the President hopes that in the wake of witnessing such an act of terrifying violence, that it will send a wake-up to the Palestinian Authority and to Israel and to all in the Middle East. Don't let this path of violence be the path that guides you. Choose another path, and that is the path that you committed yourselves to engage in dialogue, to engage in confidence-building steps, to engage in security talks, so that you can have a lasting ceasefire, which allows you to address the broader political problems in the Middle East. Terry?
There are reports that an aviation official contacted Senator Kerry and warned that Boston Logan Airport was vulnerable to a hijacking, that the plane could be then used to crash into a building. There are also reports that FBI agents were at one of these flight schools. Looking back and looking forward to securing the safety of the American people, is the President concerned about the information flow? One hand knowing what the other hand is doing, the head knowing nothing within the federal government. Is that one of what went wrong last Tuesday?
Well, I think that any time you have a nation as open as ours, where you have so many hundreds of millions of people who come to visit this country, and as you have so many crossings into this nation, we have a security system that is set up that is really among the best, if not the best in the world. I think In the wake of this, obviously, changes are being made to tighten up. But, there was no specific evidence that this attack was coming. And we remain an open nation, which has been one of our greatest strengths and assets and will always be, but it does expose us to vulnerabilities.
Does the president want to get a better system in place where information can be processed quickly to the people who are securing the country's safety?
I think you may want to direct that directly at the operational side. If you want to talk to the FAA, if you want to talk to the Department of Justice, if you want to talk to the Pentagon.
Isn't that a White House priority?
Well, the president's priority is to take all steps necessary to secure the safety of the American people, and he'll continue to do so. Randy?
In limiting this battle against terrorism to groups which threaten the United States, what incentive is there for the international coalition the president is trying to assemble to join in particular with Britain, which has its own issues with fighting?
Well, when I say that, the president has made it clear to his allies on the phone that these attacks were aimed at Western civilization. They were aimed at those who cherish liberty, and that does include nations outside the United States. And when I indicate the question about the IRA, for example, you should not interpret that to mean that the IRA is or is not part of this. What I have said, because I'm not going to be specific about any one organization, what I have said is the president commits this nation and others to fight terrorism. It's hard to tell where the bounds of one group begins and one group ends, and in that it goes beyond the United States. All nations have a reason to protect themselves, and as this coalition is formed, nations will have those reasons to protect themselves as part of this. So that broadens my earlier answer a little bit. Yes, please.
You're asking for different contributions from different countries. Are you going to ask any European countries for any military contribution? And what do you make out of countries which are neutral, like Austria?
This is going to be the long-standing policy of this White House in this matter. Until the president chooses to announce what concrete actions and steps are being taken, I won't get into the specificity of what we are asking. The requests fall into a broad series of categories involving things that could be military, political, financial, economic, diplomatic. And as I explained yesterday, the reason that I'm not going to get into those specifics is to say from this podium what we're asking somebody to do to help us would give information to those who want to hurt us. They could change their habits, they could change their behavior, they could change the way they do things if they knew what we were specifically going after. So of course I can't answer that in specificity.
But you're including military means. You're including military to political, financial, and so on.
I just answered that in the affirmative.
What's the White House position on the Justice Department's proposal to the Hill on counterterrorism and changing the laws? And I understand people on the Hill are waiting to get word from the White House whether or not they support it, and just waiting to hear from you guys.
As I indicated yesterday, the president supports Attorney General Ashcroft's efforts in this matter. He's briefing, as a matter of fact, as we speak, and so you'll be able to get additional information from the general. Thank you. Thank you.
Now we're going to take you live to FBI headquarters here in Washington, D.C., where Attorney General John Ashcroft is just getting underway with an update on the ongoing investigation into the terrorist attacks.
In the FBI field offices have been extremely helpful in helping us assemble a list of individuals that might have information about these associates, or in fact be among the associates. We are looking at the possibility that there may have been more than 4 planes targeted for hijacking, but we are not able at this time to confirm that. To date, the FBI has received more than 96,000 tips and potential leads, more than 54,000 on the website, nearly 9,000 on the hotline, the toll-free Watts line, and more than 33,000 leads that were generated in the FBI field offices. Obviously, there is still a great deal of information to be collected in order to understand the full picture of how last Tuesday's attack was planned and the full extent of damage that the terrorists intended to cause is understood. Our effort includes talking to the numbers of people that may have information related to the case. That's why we have forwarded a list of more than 190 people to national, state, local law enforcement agencies across the country, and other organizations that could be helpful in this effort, organizations like the airlines. We also have a responsibility to use every legal means at our disposal to prevent further terrorist activity by taking people into custody who have violated the law and who may pose a threat to America. The details that we have learned and the
As always, we have had a very productive meeting. Thank you.
We have time for perhaps one or two questions. Yes, sir.
Anything new from Afghanistan regarding the Pakistani initiative?
No, I know that discussions are continuing. As you also noted from press reporting, the Taliban has convened a gathering of clerics to review the situation, but I don't have anything beyond that to report at this time.
Mr. Secretary, do you hope that Japan will play a more active role for this coalition than it did during the Gulf War?
The Japanese government has been very forthcoming, and we've been appreciative of their words of support. I have been in touch with Foreign Minister Tanaka and received her words of support as well. We have not asked for anything specifically from the Japanese government, but as was the case some years ago in the Gulf War, I'm sure they will want to be supportive, consistent with their capability and ability to be supportive.
Was there any more detail?
Mr. Sec.
You take one and then we go.
President Kim Dae-jung, South Korean President Kim Dae-jung will support to the United States. Can you tell us more detail about the content of that President Kim Dae-jung to support to the United States?
Well, the main message was that, as I said, Korea will fully cooperate with the United States, and we will be very pleased to take part in the international coalition in order to support the United States in eradicating the acts of terrorism in the future.
Now we'd like to take you to a live briefing from outside the Pentagon, where emergency workers are speaking about recovery efforts at the Pentagon.
I'm here with four gentlemen that are part of the Virginia Task Force and the New Mexico Task Force, as well as the Tennessee Task Force of the USAR teams. We are continuing to make big progress. Battalion Chief for Darlington County Fire Department. I'm here with four gentlemen from the Urban Search and Rescue teams that are assisting us with this operation. To my left, the two of Virginia Task Force 2, and also the New Mexico Task Force, as well as the Tennessee Task Force. Update as far as our operation, we are continuing to make good progress as far as what we're doing, sifting through all of the information, all of the material that we have to, and at this point we do not have a better timeline. We're approximating it's about the 28th of September, but that's approximate. This is very difficult work, and we've never done anything of this magnitude, so it's hard to put a time frame on it. But like I said, the men and women here are working extremely hard and continuing to make good progress. Can you still hear me? Okay. What I'd like to do now is introduce, again, like I said, two members of the Virginia Task Force, and Melvin Mathis from the Virginia Task Force 1 would like to say a few words.
Hello, good afternoon. First of all, I would like to let you know where we're from. We're from Hampton Roads, Virginia, which is a military community, and we're very proud to be here and honored to be here serving at the Pentagon because that's the military, and it's an honor to us since we come from a military community to serve the community up here in their time of need.
Yeah, thank you, Melvin. Jerry, would you like to say a few words?
If they have any questions, I'll be glad to answer questions.
Okay. At this time, we'll answer any questions that you may have.
How secure is it in there now? We understand you're doing some of the final shoring up in there. How secure? Have you finished all the shoring up? Is it pretty safe in there now?
We are continuing. The teams are continuing to shore up. Also, I didn't mention earlier that a couple of the task forces, the Virginia task force, as well as the Tennessee task force, is transitioning out, and the New Mexico team is transitioning in, as well as the Army Specialized Team will be assisting as well. They're continuing to do shoring, and this will be an ongoing process until we get out of here. But yes, the scene is much safer than it was.
Are there areas you haven't been able to get into yet, or have you pretty much looked through everything?
Because of the degree of damage, we haven't gotten to all of the areas in detail, but we have scoped most of them out, and we have people doing what we call recon, but we haven't been able to get in and do the thorough search like we would like to.
Earlier, you folks for days had said that you were still optimistic, you were still hoping that this is a search and rescue, not a search and recovery.
I'm sorry, I can't read.
Earlier, there had been a great deal of optimism that there might still be people alive in here that kept saying that this is a search and rescue, not a search and recovery. Do we still have that level of optimism now a week later?
Well, we're continuing to hold out hope, okay? This is a difficult mission, and I'm not sure exactly what we will find, but we're continuing to have hope.
Did you recover any more human remains today?
The DOD, Department of Defense, is handling all the reporting of that type of information.
How many emergency personnel been injured?
We've had minor We've had minor injuries, nothing major though. You know, there's a lot of heavy machinery, heavy lifting, and a lot of difficult areas to work in. So, but nothing that's really requires hospitalization.
What about the rebar that's very sharp in there? Anyone injured on that?
Not that I know of, but like I said, the whole area is a difficult work zone.
Where are you focusing your efforts now?
We're continuing to focus our efforts in the center core, which is the pictures have been on TV, but we're looking at the whole building. You know, everything is there's work being done throughout the whole structure there.
From what we can see, looking at it, where's the rest of the damage? Does it go down? Does it go to the left, the right?
The majority of the damage, and I'm not sure exactly what you have seen with your reference point, but the damage is straightforward.
I have a question for Hank. Your task force just recently arrived on scene. You had a chance to see this on television before you came here. Now that you're here, how did it compare to what you expected? What were your thoughts? Was it worse? About what you expected?
I think the media coverage made this. The coverage was good enough that we weren't really surprised at first sight. Again, obviously, there's heavy damage inside. So I think we were prepared for the damage with what the other task forces had briefed us upon before we got here. I think the most difficult part was just coming here with a heavy heart.
Mr. Crawford, correct me if I'm wrong, but it doesn't appear that there were any rescues from this, at least by the search and rescue teams. Am I correct in that?
Are you asking, were there any rescues?
It doesn't seem that there was anybody pulled out of the debris alive by the search and rescue teams in this particular disaster.
At the time Tennessee Task Force 1 arrived, I have not had any knowledge of any rescues. I can't speak what happened prior to that. We arrived last Wednesday around 11 o'clock and went to work at 3 o'clock, and I don't know of any rescues after that.
Talk a little bit emotionally about how that feels when you go in there hoping that you'll be able to pull people out, but there just isn't the opportunity.
Certainly, it works on the rescues terribly. It affects their physical ability to operate, their mental ability. The stress is unbearable on them to get in there and have to work in these conditions. Unlike New York, where there is hope, constant hope of finding, because of the size of that structure and the amount of people that were in that structure. We continue to look, we continue to hope. We have not gone to a recovery mode yet. We're still in the rescue mode. We're still hoping that we may find some people inside of this structure that are alive.
Thank you.
My whole team needs to be rehabilitated. Yes, we need to have some downtime and recuperate from the rigors of this last 7 days of work we've done here.
Any more questions?
What can you gentlemen give us an idea of how much more work there is to do, what kind of work it is, how long it'll take?
It's a continuum of what we've been doing in the other updates that we've given you. This is a lot of work, okay, and it's slow work, unfortunately, and unfortunately we cannot pinpoint an accurate time frame of when exactly it will be finished. I would like to, believe me, I would really like to, but it's difficult, and we're moving careful, and we're being delicate in what we do.
Are you halfway there? Would you say that much, or not even halfway?
Like I said before, we're continuing to make good progress. We're making tremendous progress today, thanks to the efforts of everybody involved, especially the task forces. They've been outstanding, and as far as putting a precise figure on what we're done, it's hard to do at this time.
Has the focus shifted at all from, is a lot of the debris removed?
There's been a tremendous amount of debris removed, but there's also a tremendous amount more to go, and it's just a lot of work.
Did you say something about September 28th between the helicopters?
Yeah, that was an earlier prediction of targeted date, but that's just the estimate, and we're updating that figure every day.
Targeted date for what?
For where the fire department services would move out. Well, we will never be moving out completely, and it will be going over to another phase.
What would the next phase be?
Go ahead.
Okay, well, one of the things that was mentioned was about the victims. Well, we have to understand that there's more than the victims that are in that building. The families are victims as well. And what we're in now, we're in the process of helping those victims with the recovery effort so they too can bring closure to this. So when you talk about victims, it's more than victims that are just in there. It's the whole family and the community outside. And that's a part of what we do too. And I know everybody looks inside. It's very important that you understand that we understand that there are the victims of the families as well. And it's very important that the work we do, that we help in that recovery effort.
Are you glad you came?
I'm proud. I'm very proud I came. I'm honored I came. And we're, all of us here, very proud to be Americans. That's who and what we are. And when something like this happens, this is when America comes together, and it shows our strength. And what some people think is our weakest moment, it really brings out our greatest strength, and it shows that the American people can come together and be more, collectively more than whatever anybody thinks.
Crawford, maybe you can answer a question. When you look back on this after you get home, what is it that you're going to remember from what you've seen here? What's going to stick in your mind?
I think the one thing that will stick out most in my mind is the organized efforts of all the different agencies that are here, pulling together for a common goal. As Virginia spokesperson said, that there are victims here other than the victims inside, and we've been working towards that goal since the day we got here to make this thing better. We didn't create this travesty, this disaster here, but we came together to make it better.
Thank you.
Just a quick point of clarification. I did hear some of this. Someone asked the question, have you reached the halfway point? I told you before that we would tell you when we got to the halfway point, but we have recovered more than half of the remains. So that we have reached that point. As far as the timing of when this is going to end, we have used the date September 25th. I know he mentioned the date September 28th, but the date September 25th was a marker that we put out there. It is not a deadline. As he said, we're going to do this safely and we're going to do this right. But we are on track. The last thing you asked about debris, and I know you'd want specifics, to tell you how fast this operation is proceeding and how thoroughly it's proceeding. 2 days ago, we took out 2 truckloads of debris. Yesterday, we took out 35 truckloads of debris. So the operation has made a significant step forward, and it is stabilizing and moving forward at a fairly rapid pace. We're on track. It's a matter of making sure the building has been shored up and that we can get in and start removing the debris. It's a matter of getting that middle section crumpled up so that we can safely get in there. And that's really where I understand their major focus is right now. Okay, I'm going to bring the police chief and the other folks up. Chief?
For their bosses see their shoulder back.
Chief, you're live. Chief, you're live. Get right up.
4 years ago, when I came to Arlington from Massachusetts to become police chief, I tried to explain to people in Massachusetts where Arlington was. And what I used to do is try to make a little joke. I'd say when the Pentagon dials 911, Arlington responds. Well, little did I know that that would literally be true. It certainly has been amply proved in this last week. One of the things that's very unusual about this country compared to other countries is the remarkable amount of responsibility and authority that are delegated to local units of government. Nowhere is that more true than in areas of public safety. And during the past week, the Pentagon, the United States Army have been very deferential to civil authority. And we have had to step up and do an enormous amount of work in terms of traffic control, crowd control, and perimeter security. As you can well understand, this is ultimately beyond the capacity of Arlington to sustain for any length of time. It is here where our mutual aid agreements and our memorandums of understanding have become an essential component of emergency response. Certainly that's been amply demonstrated by the fire department this last week, and a number of the agencies and rescue squads from other jurisdictions have been before you. This is an opportunity to demonstrate the array of police and sheriff's departments that have also been very much an important part of this security and evidence collection work. I'd like to recognize the departments that have been here and recognize by name some of the officers that are with me today representing their agencies. Among the police departments that have rendered a great deal of assistance to us have been the Fairfax County Police, and they're represented by Officer Pat O'Hara here today. The Alexandria Police Department, represented by Officer Vincent Amundsen. The United States Park Police has been here. The Greenbelt, Maryland Police Department came with 7 officers the first 3 nights of this crisis. And when you realize that's a 50-officer department, essentially that meant that Chief James Craze sent 15% of his department to help us out. The Prince William County Police Department's been here. Bill Heyer is representing them today. The Metropolitan Police Department has literally sent us more officers than we asked for. And Wilfred Salas from that department is here. Prince George's County Police Department has helped us out. Corporal Renee Plum is here representing that agency. The Virginia State Police Department has done an extraordinary amount of work assisting with security and traffic. Captain Don Garrett is here from the Virginia State Police. George Mason University has sent officers. Sergeant Don Doggett from that agency is here. Among the sheriff's departments that have been here, certainly the Arlington County Sheriff's Department has played a key role in providing escort service and building security for a lot of sensitive sites. Sheriff's Officer LaQuincy Johnson is here representing that department. And the Loudoun County Sheriff's Department has been here in force, and Sheriff's Officer Mary Fochman is representing that agency. The Falls Church Police Department has been here. The Falls Church Sheriff's Department has been here, as has the Alexandria Sheriff's Department. The point I just want to stress is that this unique network of mutual aid compacts has really enabled us to respond usefully and effectively to a crisis that is certainly beyond the capacity of any single agency of government to deal with. I've got these officers here. Some of them have their own experiences. But the point to make for all of you is that every role that they have filled, from crowd control to anti-sniper work to traffic control, every job has been important, because if the furthest flung traffic post does not get done effectively, the whole system breaks down. Many officers volunteered. We literally had to send officers home from jurisdictions who came on their own wanting to help out, but hadn't been sent by their agency, so we could clear out our MOUs. But the point is, there's an extraordinary degree of dedication and commitment demonstrated by officers who only wanted to do one thing, and that was help out in a time of crisis. And I think it's a tribute to all of their agencies, and certainly their agency chief executives, for being willing to part with them for extended periods of time. Thank you. I don't have any questions about how mutual aid works, but we can certainly answer them. Great. Thank you. Thank you.
We're just watching a live briefing by emergency workers, police, and officials about their efforts in the Pentagon recovery operations. This briefing taking place outside the Pentagon. There'll be more live coverage coming up at 4 p.m. from the National Press Club. The UN, United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, will talk about a developing refugee situation along Afghanistan's borders. That's at 4 o'clock here on C-SPAN. Now, Transportation Secretary Norman Mineta. He met today with airline officials to discuss legislation to provide federal assistance to the airline industry in the wake of last Tuesday's terrorist attacks. Following the meeting, Secretary Mineta and Delta Airlines CEO Leo Mullen spoke with reporters in the White House driveway.
The chairman of the board of Delta Airlines. There's no question that life as we knew it changed dramatically on Tuesday, September 11. And by the same token, where we had this terrorist heinous act occur, and for the first time we had a commercial vehicle being used as a lethal weapon. And so life as we knew it prior to Tuesday has changed forever. And this is especially true in all of the transportation modes. One of those modes that we have been discussing is specifically the airline industry, where things are vastly different. And yet today we are talking about the safety and the security and the stability of an industry. Not of one or two or three or four companies, but an entire industry. We are now focused on that at the Department of Transportation since Tuesday. The whole administration, President Bush has been leading this effort, and the whole issue of trying to come up with a package not relating to whether this industry is going to be helped, but in terms of the details of what
doing for the past 7 days, and it continues to appeal to the better angels of the nature of American citizens and the nature of compassion that I know he believes fervently dwells within every American. The response has been extraordinary. And what the President, I think, is trying to ask Americans to do is to understand that the way you can respond as individual citizens is to go about your task as an American citizen, whatever that task might be, just be better at it, work at it every single day. If your task is a worker in a plant or facility, be a better worker. If you're an employer, be a better employer. If you're an entrepreneur, think creatively about how you can harness the energy of your talent with the energy and talent of other people's to create new products and new things for America. If you're a teacher, be a better teacher. So again, as I say, we rally behind the President, and I know people are looking for things to do to support this President. But the President feels strongly that the country can and will be stronger, the heart will beat stronger, and if every American accepts the challenge that the President has given, that is to accept whatever task we have in our daily lives, be it personal or professional, and just go at them and be stronger and better at it, then we truly will be a better place. Because one thing we know, and I'll conclude with this, these terrorists, they destroyed some buildings, but the buildings don't represent the economic and military strength of this country. They snuffed out lives, innocents, thousands of innocents, but they will never stamp out and never eradicate our way of life. And we admire the extraordinary work that the President has done and his leadership and that of Mrs. Bush. Their courage and their leadership in the face of this national tragedy, we are prepared to follow. And we're grateful to have the opportunity to stand next to our President today.
Governor Gilmore.